Good. As you know, we're on public live streaming, and everyone knows the play on the microphones. Have we any apologies? I believe, apart from Councillor Skinner, we're all here. There's no apologies. Now, the order of business, item number 2. We're having a somewhat disjointed meeting today for various reasons. We're going to be adjourning at 10 a.m. for a governance workshop. Jonathan Salter, everyone knows he's coming down for this. We're also going to be having a briefing on Project Mai Tai Hai and Nature Nelson. So those are going to be extra on the agenda, and we'll be dealing with them during the meeting. And we have visitors from the Suter Art Gallery, and there is a need in terms of the Official Information, Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act to go into committee. So there will be a resolution to go into committee to allow people from the Bishop Suter Trust to speak to us in confidentiality. And before they do that, we will go through the agenda up until item number 7. We'll deal with those early items, get them out of the way, and then we'll do those other matters.
Mr. Chair, there's nothing in the public excluded that requires anyone to be staying. There's only minutes to be confirmed.
There is another page to be sent out for the exclusion of the public.
For what item?
It's to do with the Bishop Suter, external attendees. Have we got copies of that page to go around the...
The business is in public as far as I can see. I'm confused.
No, we're going into committee for a special purpose. Councillor Skinner's arrived.
So something else is coming. No, we can't. Are you tabling something? Is that what was...
I have had a document prepared and sent to me with reasons why it was advisable for Council to go into confidential meeting to deal with some matters to do that are confidential to the privacy of persons who could be involved in things that are happening at the Suter. I've just now been advised that the representatives of the Suter who are here in public gallery are now telling me that they feel that they can talk about it without the need to go into committee. Is that correct, Craig?
Right, actually, we have a briefing of where we wish to go in the next 5 years in public, and I think that would be appropriate with your...
It would be.
With your permission to do that in public, I think that's very appropriate, and that may be all that we need to do today, if that's with your wishes.
Right, well, from the chair I will determine, as we go through your presentation, if you're getting into an area which could impact upon the privacy of your staff and others, and if we do, then the committee will need to take the appropriate action and go into committee so that can be done in free, frank discussion without embarrassment or problems under Lagoima. Thanks for that. So there's no members, let me put it this way. Going to item 3 on the agenda, interests. Just a reminder, if you've got anything on the agenda today, declare it, please. If not, keep your register of interests up to date. No one from the public forum is in attendance. We move to item number 5, confirmation of minutes. They've been circulated on pages 8 to 11. Someone move that they be referred to true and correct record. Move Councillor Courtney, seconded Councillor Dalberg. Is there any discussion? No corrections, alterations? There's not. I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. We now move to item number 6 on the agenda, pages 12 to 13. Good morning, Your Worship. And that's the status report, which is on pages 12 and 13. And I'm going to ask Mr. Ward to give us a brief update on where we've got to on the mountain biking and gondola project. And hopefully it is getting closer to the time when we can say this is really going to happen.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a very brief update from the Cycle Lift Society. The first stage report has been finalised and is in draft with the committee. They are just reviewing the financial information contained within that draft, and once that is finalised, which should be in the near future, they will then have a commercial proposition to go out and start seeking funding from third parties to leverage off the council funding that has been indicated within the annual plan. They've also had some discussions with other landowners in the vicinity of Fringed Hill, and those have been positive. There certainly seems to be a great deal of interest in the proposal. And the contractor select contracts, the chief executive of that company has been across. They've been involved in a number of gondola and tourism projects. He has come across to visit the site, and they are, again, still very positive about the prospects for the venture and for that site.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. Are there any questions? Councillor Rutledge.
From these discussions, are you aware of anything that we might need to take into account for our LTP?
No, I'm not, through the chair.
No further questions? Any comments? Yes, Councillor Courtney.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Officer Ward, have we considered as a council making representations on their behalf to the Ministry of Economic, the Minister of Economic Development? Would that be worth considering?
Through the chair, I think there certainly is some opportunity in the future for either council or the Cycle Lift Society or a third party to tap into central government tourism funding and infrastructure funding in the future. The conversations I've had to date are that the project isn't at that stage yet, so it would need to be at the consenting stage in order to start to attract some of that infrastructure funding, but it's certainly an opportunity in the future.
Thank you. No further discussion. It's been moved by Councillor Noonan that the report be received. It's been seconded by Councillor Skinner. Is there any discussion on the motion? There's not. I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, no. It is carried. We move now to item number 7, Chairman's report. And it's very pleasing to be able to report that Standard & Poor's have again analysed what we do and assessed how well we're going. We've come out with a very good result. It's a double A for long term, and it's an A-1+ for short term matters. And it's because of our good control on our capital expenditure and our debt. And really, it demonstrates that they've recognised that we have sound financial and forward-thinking approaches in what we're doing. I think it reflects good on Governance Committee and governance of Council and the Council as a whole, and particularly as we push ahead with our capital program to make up for the things that past councils, without being critical of past councils, have left us a little bit behind, and we are moving forward. We are achieving these things and getting back to the situation where we can feel confident that our infrastructure is something that befits our city. And to get through all this and have Standard & Poor's coming and telling us that we're managing our debt and our capital, it's very pleasing. So well done to all members of Council and Her Worship, who is taking us through the long-term plan this year, where we will continue this good approach, I'm sure. So that's my report. I'd like to move that it be received. Seconded by Councillor Noonan. Took my eye. So now in the next item on the agenda is the Bishop Suitor. So we don't have to change the alteration of the. Pardon? Oh, I have not put it. All in favour, please say aye. It's been seconded. Against, no. Carried. Thank you. Item number 8. And I'd like to invite Mr. Ward to present the report first, and then we'll invite the representatives from the suitor to join us at the table. Chris, we're talking on pages 14 to 89.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to give some context to the committee, this is the opportunity for the committee to look forward with the Trust to what the Council would like to see the Trust deliver from the 18-19 year onwards. And so to give some context, I have attached a previous statement of intent and a previous annual report. I'm not expecting this as an opportunity to debate those, because we've had an AGM and we've had the half-yearly reporting so there has been opportunities for those matters historically to have been dealt with. The focus of today's recommendation is really looking forward. Mr. Potton, Ms. Soderberg and Ms. Hervey are here to give a bit of a flavour for the vision moving forward. And I have, in my recommendations, suggested some things that Council may be looking for in order to help clarify the direction towards that vision. But I will invite Mr. Potton and the other two trustees to the table, and I'm sure they're happy to speak to you and to take any questions. If I may just remind the committee, we are in public. There may be some matters that the trustees are not prepared to talk about, and if the chair would like to take us into the public excluded to discuss those matters, then that would be a way of managing that, and either myself or the trustees or the chair, I'm sure, will signal if those matters should be in public excluded. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Wood. At the beginning of the meeting, I explained that originally we thought that we would be going into confidential, but there is a good chance that we won't need to, so this will all be done in public meeting, unless it becomes evident that there is a need to go into committee. I'll just reiterate what Mr. Ward said. The documents that you got with you are historical. They've been things that we've gone through a couple of times before in the past, and they are the old statement of intent and, of course, the annual report which has been received. So welcome to the table, Chair Craig, Margaret Soderberg and Gabrielle Hervey. So Craig, please launch into what you're going to present us with today.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, councillors, for having us today. Yes, we've been going now, of course, in the new building for over a year and learning to live with it. And as our expectations of that building were very high, we can be very happy to report that, in fact, those expectations are being more than met from it. So what we conceived and what we built with your extraordinarily good support, and we will never stop thanking you for the fact that you provided $6 million for that building, and it has turned out very well. I can report to all of you in terms of the way in which the public are finding it as a place of their own. And we can kind of note that to the extent that people are coming and spending longer in that gallery space, not just in the cafeteria, which is good, but they are spending time in the gallery space longer, each individual visitor, than they used to in the old premises. So I'm saying there's something happening around the art in the building which is actually causing people to come and spend significant amounts of time with their art, with their collection. And we're trying to encourage that feeling that it's their gallery. So it's our gallery if we're Nelsonians, it's their gallery if we're talking in this sort of formal position about it. And that seems to be working too, very well in fact. And we have now in excess of 100,000 visitors going through, which is a very good number. Comparisons are odious and they never work perfectly, but if you look at New Plymouth, then you have a situation where the council puts in $4 million each year to the gallery and they get 130,000 people. So we do pretty well for what I think is a carefully costed and very professionally run local gallery. What we intend to do in the next 5 years, however, and in association and having had a meeting with the NPA, if I've got the NDA, I was close for the NPA, the Tourism Board as I call them, and I forget all these new acronyms that people have and the letters they use, but we have discussed with them, and we want independently, but as well it fits well with them, to have the Suter Art Gallery as a particular destination spot. And that is the sort of contemporary language around which we phrase the notion that when people come to Nelson, they are coming in part to go to that Suter Art Gallery. Art and cultural tourism is a very big part of the tourism mix, not just New Zealand-wide, but worldwide. In fact, it's bigger, and it surprises me as a conservationist to even say this, but it's bigger than the nature tourism around the world. So more people go to see cultural and art museums than to either go to sporting events or to see nature. So it's the winner of the winners in terms of contemporary cultural tourism throughout the world. To achieve that, art galleries do have to raise their bar and have pretty high standards of what they're doing. We believe, and having made a 5-year plan, which we're in discussion with the officers at the council with at present, that we have a mix that should be able to make the Suter a destination. And that mix is essentially having very good exhibitions. We're now teasing out our 5-year exhibition plan. They don't have to be extraordinarily expensive. Each year, at least one of them should be a blockbuster, one that has, that special national, international flavour around it. But essentially the rest of them have to reflect the significant artists that we have in Nelson. Some are locally very significant, and we're having a Potter's exhibition coming up, which will reflect that over the summer period. Some of them have a national significance, and we also have to pull in the odd one that exhibition each year that has an international significance. And that, like the Adams Festival, will bring in people from overseas. It's quite extraordinary how successful the Adams has been at doing that sort of thing, and I'm sure we can also do that at the Suter. That's what we're planning. The sort of blue sky, big hope that I think one reason the council has been gracious enough to allow me to stay as a chairperson a bit longer than normally is the case, is that I'm hoping we will get, and I am committed to trying very, very hard to get, and I do want to be successful, work of international significance at the Suter. That's a standalone project where I will go out as chairperson and raise the funds for that and bring that item to the Suter, and that will make it a special destination. When people say, why are you going to that gallery? If it's New Plymouth, they say to see the Len Lai. He was famous not only in New Zealand but internationally, and I think we need a work of that stature sitting within the Nelson Suter. So that's something that I'm, as chair, and the board thankfully are committed to sitting behind me and encouraging me to do that, to go out and raise the funds and do that. But that aside, the 5-year plan, it's good exhibitions, a blockbuster, and it's acquisitions. You have to continually keep supporting the artists and updating and bringing your collection into a contemporary milieu, into an avant-garde, a now sort of situation, as well as your very good collection that you already have, which are your old famous ones, from the Gullies to the Van der Veldens to the Willistons, etc. You also have to be active, and you have to be now. So the Suter has committed itself to raising in the order of 300,000 every year of its own volition through donors, through our donor policy, which is becoming more and more active, and I must say people are being very generous around that so that we can keep that acquisition going. So that is something that we would like to tell you that that's a commitment we're making, we're budgeting it, we will achieve it as part of whatever support you give us, which is great, and we're grateful for it in terms of the administrative side. We'll be sitting out there with the more sexy side, if you like, in terms of asking the public for money to get in acquisitions to put on the exhibitions. We're also running and committed to a lot of adult education as well as children's education. You've probably all heard it too many times from me already, but we put in the order of 6,000 school kids through a year, and it's something that's very much appreciated within the community, within the schools and within groups, that we put a big emphasis on bringing children through the Suter, and we're now extending that through into the adult area as well. We've had such a good uptake, we're having to put on more adult art classes. So if you're interested, get in early, book in. It's inexpensive. We do have a cost recovery, of course, with a little margin that we're putting on that we're increasing. But we do encourage you to join those classes, but you'll have to book early. We've got a good demand there. That feels good, very good. So that, in summary, I think it's probably better if I don't go on too long and allow my two accomplices here to add whichever I've missed out in a big way, but open it to question time, is what the suitor's vision is for the next 5 years. We've had our recent AGM and thank very much those councillors that came along, and it's great each year to see, and there's always been a very good attendance of councillors, and they've heard me many times iterating the same thing, but often if you say it enough times, it happens, and we're committed that those sorts of things that I've outlined will happen. Anything I've missed, Gay or Margaret?
No.
If not, any questions anyone has, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Craig. I take it that you've had a look at our agenda today and you've seen the recommendations that are in our agenda in terms of the statement of expectation from this council to you. Are there any comments you want to make on the proposals here for the statement of expectation that are in the agenda today?
The statement of expectation is not the exact year, is it, Margaret? Oh, sorry, the statement of intent. The statement of expectations, yes. I would. Could you perhaps refer to that then?
So we've had a look at the expectations, and I don't think we find anything in particular that we feel would be onerous and needs to be brought into our ongoing planning, things like the cyber security things, the things that are there. I don't think that we're finding that there's anything there that we're concerned about.
Good. Are there any questions around the table? Councillor Skinner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, thank you for being here. You mentioned about the donors being very active, so you're getting a lot of outside investment or donations, etc. bequests. What's your secret to that? Obviously, I've often in the past, people being very kind and generous.
Yes.
And you're saying, and there's a higher expectation from you now of stepping up the stakes of what you're providing. We're involved in a lot of things, and some things we struggle with that, and you've been very successful.
No, that's not the answer. Yes.
Craig, pretend you didn't hear the question.
Sorry?
Pretend you didn't hear the question. Just say pardon.
Just say you're the answer.
No, I think that you have to have a very good cause. You've got to have something that's central to the community, and I think that I have always believed, funnily enough in the past, I didn't believe as strongly just how central art was to the culture of any community or any country, in fact. And as I have grown older, I've started to acknowledge the heritage value of something like the Suter, with that wonderful gift by Amelia Suter and Bishop Suter, through to people like Wollaston, the practicing artist who gave over 100 of his works for free to the Suter, etc. That those sorts of effects are not something like a new movie that excites you, that you get excited about, or winning a game of rugby or something. They're something that are a part of the integral heritage of this place that we call Nelson. We see the hills of Nelson through Wollaston's eyes. And that sounds like a very idealistic sort of statement that floats somewhere in the ether that doesn't affect our daily lives. But in fact, what I recognise as I get older is that value of that heritage, the way in which we see ourselves, is often carried through art. So I maintain those arguments when I'm talking to people, when I'm eyeballing them, Tim, and the only way to get money out of someone is to look them straight in the eye and say, how much would you please give? And I'm now asking you.
Ask for the order.
Yes. Then it's with those arguments that it carries the weight in my heart. If it carries the weight in my heart, then it is going to have more impact on the person that I'm referring to. And we had a wonderful meeting yesterday of potential donors and existing donors out at Christine Boswick, now retired but famous potter, nationally significant. All of that was voluntary, the money that gives voluntary, etc. But it gave them as much pleasure to give, if you wish, to give a sense of belonging to that community. And I will tell you that some of those people have not lived in Nelson for a long time, but they want to be a part of this place. And that made me feel very, very good, you know. So if you believe hard enough in what you're going for, and if it is correct that there is that heritage value in art, that it does speak to the way in which we see ourselves, you can run the argument. And the response I have been extraordinarily encouraged by. Dame Ann Herkes came to help us raise that $6 million, our side of the bargain, and she said that she was quite amazed, encouraged, and frankly actually blown away by the number of yeses that we got from the people that we approached for money. People in the past have said, oh, people in Nelson have got tight pockets and they don't give, and you know, they've got every reason why something shouldn't be done rather than why it should be done, and we have not found that as the case. I don't want to paint a rosy picture. It's not much fun at a voluntary level doing this all the time, but if you do it in situations like the Suter, it does seem to work, Tim.
Yeah, generous newcomers are always very welcome. And they may entice our tight-fisted locals to follow suit. Councillor Dalberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for your presentation, Craig. And two parts really. One is your performance and keep priorities. See some of the things we've achieved, but I'm really honing in on that international component. And that was really the reason of stepping the level of the building and the surroundings of the park to make that. It is an international quality for a small city. So I want to bring in that international status or exhibition, or are we intending sort of loaning, borrowing, purchasing? What's your concepts and how do we help there?
Yeah, thank you. It is most likely that what we would do, in fact very strongly would be my recommendation, that we do acquire a piece, and more likely, in other words, a work of art that is a permanent structure at the Suter. And I say structure in the sense it may well be of the nature of something that is sculptural rather than paint on the wall. When you talk of someone like Anish Kapoor or Olafur Eliasson, who are two of the really great artists alive today on the planet, they're doing wonderful work. Olafur Eliasson has just done some work at Versailles in France, where they relate the water outside the building into the building, literally through a mirror shining into this beautiful dome. He did a magnificent work, which I still smile about every time I see it, in London at the Tate Modern, at the Turbine Hall, which is an old electricity building that had been converted into the most successful art gallery in New Zealand, in the world now, sorry, in terms of visitor numbers. And he put a sun in the middle of winter in the Turbine Hall in London. Now it's miserable, cold, grey and lousy weather in London. They just came in and they lay under it, the people. What I'm talking about is a work of art that deals with the fact that we have a beautiful eel pond, we have a beautiful Queen's Garden that's integral to the beautiful building we've put there. If we can make a relationship between those two through someone whose intelligence and ability in art exceeds all of us combined in the room and something more, then that will draw the people in, but it would have to be permanent in the sense that people go to see the Eliasson in the same way they go to see the Lenlai. There's always a Lenlai up at New Plymouth. There'd always be our, for instance, Eliasson in Nelson. So that would be the magnet, if you wish, that dragged them in. It would have to be appropriate to the context of Nelson. So it's got to speak out of the fact that we are both in a beautiful environment, we're artistic culturally, the way we present ourselves, from our wine to our pottery to our natural values of Abel Tasman, etc., etc., would have to integrate that sort of idealism within the context of the structure. If you ask what do these things cost, it's not asking how long is a piece of string. It's more like saying, well, the artist comes, the artist looks, and you start talking. And then you start developing, and some things are beyond your means, other things are not beyond your means, and you start exciting people. The world of art is definitely commercial. There are definitely monetary values that are very, very significant, and that's what I fight for the suitor. But there's also something way above that. If someone gets excited and interested and imaginative in their response, their discount can be phenomenal.
Thank you.
Yes, well, that does sound very exciting and like a great plan. Councillor Noonan.
Just a comment, really, Mr. Chair. Comment regarding the fundraising and the fundraising that the suitor are doing themselves. And the comment really is that sometimes the funding comes from the unexpected in Nelson, I find. And people in Nelson might look like they've got gauze pockets, but when they're passionate about something, they are very generous. And it's a bit of an anomaly, I find. And I was born here, so I'm speaking from personal experience because I'm a bit the same. I don't just give to anything, but if I'm passionate about something, then the generosity comes from the passion. And I think we've got a lot of passionate people in Nelson. And just regarding the new people coming in, I find that they're so excited about being here, they just can't wait to do something. So I'm glad that the suitor are actually connecting with the new people coming in, because they want to be part of Nelson, as you say. So yeah, keep up the good work, and I might have a look at the art classes. I really love painting, so
There you are, there's a good
I haven't got
chance.
any walls to put them on now.
Councillor Rutledge.
Thank you, through you. Not to put you on the spot if these aren't on the top of your head, but do you have a numbers update in terms of visitors through the door over the last year, and particularly if there's any split between the tourist sort of outside the region versus inside? I know there was something in the papers, but I think they're older numbers.
Our total figure at this point, and it's give or take a little, but is 102,167 visitors for the year 2007. Why I'm saying is I don't trust our systems completely, but that's near enough within Kui. Kids come in and out and people do things. Yeah, we are getting a door counter. We're getting a more formal system. We have gone through a process of doing some surveying, excuse me, of visitors. You know, where are you from? Why did you come? Where did you hear it? Through this modern thing called iPhone or through written? You know, but you can only ask people a few questions before they start to turn away a bit. At present, our best assessment is that where visitors were from, visitors to Nelson, 47%. So that's overseas 20% of that 47%. So yeah.
20% overseas.
Yeah, 27%. Sorry, 20% overseas. Almost 50% are from outside of Nelson.
Okay.
That's
very helpful.
Yeah, but it's not. No. Round numbers. Yeah.
Thank you. The grant that council provides to cover the admission charge, have you been able to assess the value of that and how it's related to those numbers of admissions? Have you any ideas?
Did you want to?
I think I'm not quite new, so I think.
Oh, sorry, I do it.
So, but we are finding that we're getting a lot of repeat visitors. So people from within the region are coming back more than once or twice a year. So that's probably a good indication that the fact that there isn't a charge means that it's making it more accessible for people locally. So obviously we've got a higher proportion of people coming in from Nelson than the wider region, but we're finding that people, first-time visitors to the suitor is about 36%, but then we're getting people that sort of come 3 to 6 times a year. So, and we're doing that off a reasonably small sample. We did a sample over a short period of time, but we are finding that we are getting a lot of repeat visitors, and I think that not having an admission charge is actually making a big difference to that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Following on from that, Craig, thank you for your presentation. I really enjoyed it this morning. I'm sure we all have, and we enjoy getting the feel of your enthusiasm there. But in the statement of expectation, it does have a section that refers to developing further your revenue stream opportunities. Now, by that I mean generating further income by other means. And you haven't touched on that today. You've spoken about, you know, exhibitions and acquisitions and those type of things. But to us who are, you know, concerned about the ratepayer's purse and how we spend their money, we'd like to see you, and it does say it in here in the statement of expectation that you should be exercising your minds on that. Do you see opportunities there besides the cafe, you know, the income from that, possibly the rental and the theatre and the souvenir type shop? Other opportunities that you're looking at?
Well, very definitely, and I think as we hone down into our financial expectation for the next 5 years, then that will come up that we are looking at the costing of all of those sub-areas that you have referred to, plus adult education. We do have a margin in there, increasing that slightly. So you have mentioned, you know, with the rent of the cafe is pretty much a fixed, and there's a sort of a, you know, that's as much as you can ask around town sort of number, which is the way that works. So that's kind of fixed if you wish, and that's guaranteed. That will continue to come, and the suitor is, you know, known for its cafe, so that's working. The areas that we're working very hard on, and John Hambleton, who's not here today but is having quite a lot of discussion with councillors on the financials for the suitor, is honing down with Julie, the CEO, into the theatre, maximum use of the theatre, special events that we hope to hold with corporates and others in that beautiful Jane Evans foyer that we have, you know, in association with Art Next Door sort of thing. And so I believe we've even had a wedding in the Suter Art Gallery. Yes, quite as, yes. So, yes, using it as an event centre. And there was another cost recovery area, but we are honing them down, and we're trying to get a bigger margin.
More children art classes.
And yeah, more. Yeah, user pay children. So that's to be distinct from the fact that we put the school kids through for free, but also after school classes, ones where we charge. So yes, we're getting quite hard and tight and specific around all of those cost. So we're not going just for cost recovery. We're going for cost recovery plus in those areas. We will be charging for some exhibitions if they're a blockbuster and a special one. And it's that whole question of how much can you ask? You know, will it put people off if it's $7 rather than $5? And we believe we've been slightly undercharging in a number of areas, so we're chasing them up. And we do actually have numbers which we will reveal to you in our 5-year plan, which indicate that, you know, there's over 100,000 that we can get out of those sorts of things, and we can increase that, and we aim to increase it, and we're determined to. So, yep, we're very aware that that is one way, and a very good way, of bringing in some increased funding. But that said, and that's very important, and we're doing that, the straight out patronage is the area where the successful galleries around the world get the real money, if you want to put it in that sort of language. We have a very good volunteers, which saves us a lot of cost to the council. So we have several hundred friends, and some of those people do our library work. They do quite sophisticated work for us for nothing. It's very important that we keep them going. We have our 5x40 donors, and we have people that give in between, so things like framing works and all that. You'll often see a good Nelsonian's name behind a frame of a new painting that we've received that needed reframing, $150. Basically, we're chasing dollars wherever we can, and quite stringently, and I've got a board that's very committed to that, which is very good.
Councillor McGurk.
Yeah, thanks for your indulgence, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Craig. We always enjoy your presentations. You know, we always get factored in, you know, the hard data about visitor numbers and income streams and things like that. And I think you touched on it before about how art in the community sort of touches the passion. And I'm just wondering, is there some commentary that you can do in sort of the statement of intent, or some way you can report how the suitor contributes to the quality of life of Nelson? You touched on things about things like volunteerism. You know, you get a high number of volunteers, or how people might say that they go to the centre because it's sort of you know, a connection to their sense of place. You know, it's highly subjective. It'll mean different things to different people. But I'm just wondering some commentary from you as the chair or the board about how the suitor might contribute to the quality of life of Nelson and Nelsonians.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it is the intangibles that are hardest to put into any report in terms of also to put numerically. And I've found since I was a councillor sitting here many moons ago that there's more and more demand for hard numbers these days rather than the intangibles. So that, you know, often the reports and there's pages upon pages of numbers. And yes, that's important. And yes, we are, you know, in a world that's demanding more and more of satisfaction figures. You know, did you get a 50% or a 70% satisfaction? Everything has to be numerically honed down. It isn't, of course, answering the human condition just to merely put things back to numbers. It's essential that we do it in a modern context. I mean, that's my intro to the fact that I do get a great deal of feedback from individuals about the pleasure of the new building sitting in the gardens that have a historic association here. And that makes me feel very good. So that is an intangible. You know, how do you measure the pleasure of what the city with its 6 million input has put into that versus what they've done with the stands at Trafalgar Park? You don't have a measurement. There isn't a measurement. There is only just the fact that, you know, we love both of them. We can watch the Marcos when they're winning down there and we can watch the Suda when it's winning. You know, it's creating an atmosphere around a city and a culture that feels as though it's onto winning situations, that it does actually provide something that when they are comparative, go to Blenheim, you know, see what they've got, go to New Plymouth, so we are in that sort of situation, and people are feeling that the Suitor is working and working very well and has a great deal of growth area. But I often hone it back to individual responses, such as when the very generous donation of Sally Hunt to allow us to buy the Bill Hammond, which is the Heafy Highway, very relevant, in fact most relevant to Nelson than anywhere else, of course, that beautiful painting that sits at the Suitor in the permanent collection now. An artist, Sally Burton, who has a show that's exceeded all of our opening numbers, I think, just a wonderful show that you must see about the Wairau incident that's up there now, came into the Suitor after we'd bought that work, looked at it on the wall, came and spoke to me and said that that singular painting had changed the way that she was now working in her art in Nelson. And she is an elderly artist. She'd be quite happy with me using that word, elderly. She's someone who's established, she's well known, her work sell for $8,000 to $12,000, etc. But she said she saw the Hammond, she goes back to that Hammond, it's changed the way she works. She's now presenting to all of us the Wairau incident, which is at the, you know, the wonderful art that she's done on a very historic and significant and cultural muck-up that we made, that we should atone for and feel shameful about, but also acknowledge that we've done it and that it's part of our history at the Suitor at present. So that's an individual case. It's a very hot, emotional and wonderful example, really, of how an artist who's still working, affected by work that we acquired through the generosity of a visitor that lives in Nelson, Sally Hunt, our patron. That's how the art world works. So I only need to go to my cocktail party or my, you know, down the beach and someone say, I was stunned by that work at the Suitor. And that's my response to all the number games. You know, I go for epiphanies, I go for stunners, I go for, you know, we didn't just win, we really won.
Yep, that's really good, Craig. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I happily take on board your comments about free entry. However, I think that a heck of a lot more people expect to pay than you're prepared to acknowledge. And when I was last up there, which was a little while ago, I had great difficulty finding a donation box. And I know that you talked about moving it.
It has been.
You have moved it?
It has moved. It's now just directly opposite the reception. You'll be right there.
And have you had any noticeable effect of that?
I'm not sure in terms of the numbers, again. Every time I go through, I sort of, you know, I see money sitting in there. It's very cleverly designed. It's slightly kinetic, So you put money in, and once it builds up to a certain amount, then it moves. So it's encouraging. Encouraging activity. I think you should come back and try it out.
Okay, thank you.
And I think the number, and I could stand corrected on this, is that it's somewhere between 5,000 and 7,000. It's in that order of what we have
that's what I would
received through it. But no, I did not speak. Margaret did briefly on the fact that the council very generously have allowed us to, to test the notion of going free. And it really has worked. I mean, we are up at numbers now, which I feel very proud of, which is, over 100,000 people going to an art gallery in a provincial area. It's only beaten by New Plymouth, and as I say, they do have a lot up their sleeve that we don't yet have, but will achieve. And I think we'll exceed their numbers, because I think we're much more public friendly in the way our gallery performs. But, all I can do is say thank you for that. It is utterly transformed the way in which people come to the gallery and come again and again. And one must be careful about talking about the level of what people can afford in a contemporary society, a minimum wage and all of those things that the Auckland Council's put you in big trouble on. But the fact is that those families and people that are, below 60,000 a year, the cost to go to an art gallery, you don't repeat it once, you've done it once. Department of Conservation has the same thing for the huts. At one level, people who can afford it, they can afford it, but for families with 3 or 4 kids that are on low income, it is a factor, and it's a factor that I believe, without having numbers in front of me, but talking to people from areas in Nelson, they're going back to the suitor in a way that they wouldn't if they had to pay each time.
Well, I want to take this opportunity to thank you, Chairman Craig and Gabriel and Margaret, for coming along and being so frank with us and outlining pretty good visions, in my view, very good visions of what can happen. I think we're at the stage where councillors have seen the report, the sections 4.1 to 4.14, all covering the points that we've got. I've had a mover from Councillor Matheson and a seconder from Councillor Delberg caught my eye first.
Option 1, Mr. Chair.
So we'll remove first the receipt of the report. That's been moved and seconded for the receipt. I'll put that. There's no discussion. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, no. Carried. I now call for a mover for the recommendation to council, being moved by Councillor Noonan. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Courtney. Is there any discussion? Councillor Rutledge.
I think the suit is fantastic. It's doing a fantastic job. We've heard numbers that there's 100,000 people coming through, which is really quite amazing. We've also heard that nearly 50% of them are outside the region. I have a very strong view that we do need a charging regime in the suitor, and now's the time to indicate that. I think we would be much poorer as Nelson if we didn't have the suitor. However, we all know, and we're all very aware with what's coming up, about the pressures that we are going to be under as a council financially. And I believe now is the time to make that very strong indication that we are going to expect a partial charge sort of entry fee regime to go forward, just like we do with many, many other places around town where there is a mix of public and private benefit. So I'm interested to see if there's support around the table, but if there is, and if I see a couple of nods here and there, I would like to propose an amendment that includes that specific wording that would be an intention.
Right, I'll open this up. Personally, I think it would be preferable to give it another year to see how well the donation box can go. It's the indication from the question is that the donation box is working, and personally, I think I'd rather see it
for clarity, I'm not opposed to that as a concept. It's that we're asking for a 5-year plan as part of this process. and I would like to very strongly indicate that in that plan includes beginning a charging regime. I don't find it reasonable that the ratepayer of Nelson is completely picking up the tab for 40+ thousand tourists and visitors to have free entry. I just don't find that reasonable given the context of everything else that we do and the pressures that we are going to have going forward.
Right, we've heard that viewpoint. I've not had an amendment moved. Are there any other comments? Councillor Dalberg.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. My comment really was around that, my question on the international purchase. I'm kind of getting where they're establishing their structure. They're getting all those people who are very keen to start funding the items we need or they need. And I've always thought what it really needed was a major pulling thing. I mean, Williston might be great, but you need something international to get people here. And I think you need to allow them to get to that set-up point and get that established, and then I've got no problem about your charging rate there. But I think the Chair Craig mentioned on a big exhibition like that, or a major New Zealand blockbuster, very similar to what the museum does when they get their major attendances in, they put a charging rate there. So before we start making a bulk thing on everyone being charged, I'd like them to explore that, and maybe they then need to put that in their 5-year plan. But I would like them to get established before we start putting a bulk rate on it.
So you're suggesting that we ask in the statement of intent for just a greater...
Craig has already mentioned that on their 5-year plan. Part of that is an exhibition plan.
Yes.
He's already said he wanted one blockbuster a year.
Yep.
He's also said he wanted to go out and fund a international exhibition that will attract really top people come to town. I think you need to let him put that in the plan, and then maybe he's already mentioned about his funding charges for his blockbuster exhibitions. Maybe we need to see what his budget is, and then I think we can query that comment then if you think we need to make a daily charge on the average public.
Thank you, Councillor Dalberg. Any other comments? Councillor Rutledge indicated he has words for an amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and it would be an addition to 4.16.1, opportunities to increase third-party funding, and it's just an addition, including instigation of an entry fee charging regime.
Opportunities, you're asking that to be considered. The wording doesn't quite hit the mark for me. Read it again, please.
Opportunities to increase third-party funding, including instigation of an entry fee charging regime.
Right, that's an amendment which has been moved. Does it have a seconder? It doesn't. I'm sorry, it lapses.
All right, fair enough.
We return to the motion which has been moved and seconded. Is there any further debate? There's not. There is. Councillor Skinner.
Yes, I support what we've got here in front of us, and I support the continued, at least at this stage, of the three entry. And as Mr. Potton pointed out, it is great for families, and he's quite right. Locals and families, or many families, would only go once. If there was a charge there and a chance for them to go twice, especially the kids, to grow and experience new displays coming in. And also my reasoning for that is that the community has been very generous through the council in funding this. So I feel the community would feel they've taken an ownership of it and would like to appreciate the use and entry of the gallery. So it'd be far too early to consider that. And also, being it's only a year in, it's a time for what their vision. I fully agree. And it was well put by the trustee. Well put their vision. I totally support, and it needs that time to bed in. And the vision there is for that international status, and this is all part of that. Maybe down the track, as the vision gets altered or fine-tuned, maybe we can hear if there's any feedback on that. So I'm very impressed of where it's going, and almost had a bit of a challenge in there. And actually, rather than just supporting what here is and the status quo as such, I'm always keen to take up the challenge of New Plymouth. Taranaki is a beautiful place. New Plymouth have got a great, and it was nice to hear we're only second, just behind them. So maybe we should be aiming high to exceed them. And Mr. Potton was indicating he thinks we may, without putting any pressure on it. But if we're talking about non-numerical data, let's just at least be a place that people perceive as Nelson is the international place to see artwork as well as local stuff. And if you're coming to New Zealand, make sure you stop off at Nelson and see Vasuta. So I'd like to see that us in our vision, if not numerically. But thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Skinner. Councillor Matheson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm supporting the recommendation to Council, but I just thought I'd like to add a word or two about the board itself. I think, Craig, if I can not completely turn my back to you, but to say that your speech to us this morning was one of the finest I've heard. You have, I mean, it was slightly emotional, but you really put your heart out there, and I reward you with that and say thank you very much. You and the trustees are certainly bringing to fore the reasons why we've got a top gallery, not just in New Zealand, and I've been fortunate to look at others. So my comments were really addressed to the board and especially to Craig, and thank you for the work you're doing on behalf of the city.
Thank you, Councillor Matheson. You have preempted any comments that I could make, and you've done it very well. The board had to be much congratulated. And in terms of the discussion that's taken place, I just refer members to items 4.6 and 4.16.1, both of which look at asking the Trust Board to look as well as it can at non-revenue or non-core opportunities for income. The expectations that are in the report are in the motion, and I think we've completed all the debate, so I'm going to put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against? It's been carried. Thank you very much. Thank you to the visitors. We have time now. We have time to move to the next item, because Mr. Jonathan Salter is running 5 to 10 minutes late, so we will now go to the next item on the agenda, which is the Regional Development Agency, pages 90 to 140. There are no visitors coming for this item. The documentation, again, is the historical documentation of the annual report and the last statement of intent. Mr. Ward is going to present the report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll take the report as read. The Council's had a number of opportunities to hear from the Regional Development Agency's Chair and CEO, and I didn't think there was much value in imposing on their time again today. Again, this is about the statement of expectation for next year. The key programmes that have been articulated by the NRDA in relation to regional identity and regional growth programme will continue over the next year, and so the only specific expectations that I have included are those that were discussed at the Joint Shareholders Committee, and I took the liberty of applying those across our other CCOs as well in relation to cybersecurity and natural hazard recovery.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Any questions? Councillor Dalberg?
No questions, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to move this. Following up on the AGM, the data seems to be a repeat, so I'm happy that we've covered it.
Thank you very much. Seconded by Councillor Rutledge. Is there any further discussion? There is. Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just looking at the indicative measures of success and achievements in this SOI, and we've had some discussion previously at annual meetings about whether they're actually the right ones. And I'm just wondering, Mr. Ward.
Which report items are you referring to?
Well, look, I mean, some of them.
4.1 to 4.14?
Some of them are out of date. No, I'm actually looking at the document itself. So if I'm looking at measure of success and progress, so page 102, and we've got, these are kind of time bound, so we're past these points. What I'm interested in, and I do recall this discussion, those of you who may at the annual meeting, that some of these we perhaps could get some better performance measures for this SOI throughout the document. We didn't have a, there was a comment actually from, I think, the board chair that the performance measures could do with a look at.
I do recall the board chair saying at the AGM that he's more interested in results rather than monitoring and counting. And that indicated to me that, yes, he has a desire to be more specific in having measurable outcomes. Mr. Ward, do you want to comment?
Yes, if I may, through you, Mr. Chair. The reason I've attached the previous SOI was to give some context to the future statement of expectation. There is no expectation that the indicative measures will be the same, and that's when the Council receives the draft statement of intent, and once it's returned at the end of February, there's an opportunity then to look at the particular work programme and the particular measures that have been identified against that. I think there was also some discussion about the monitoring indicators which the NRDA have attached to their statement of intent, and those were measures which previously had been key performance indicators for the EDA, but the NRDA took the view that some of those measures were beyond their control, and so they felt it was useful information for Council to receive the trends in terms of those monitoring measures, but keeping them separate from actually being key performance indicators for the NRDA itself. So it was, their KPIs are around those programs that they have control over, and we would hope that they would impact on those monitoring measures, although it may take some years for that to happen.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Ward. Through you, Mr. Chair, then I think it would be helpful if the board, I mean, they may do this as a matter of course, but just in terms of the dialogue backwards and forwards, that we indicate in the statement of expectation that we'd like them to review the performance measures, or to update them.
That is a matter of course, but if you want to highlight that and make that specific point, happy for that to be included in the resolution.
Right.
I think I'd like to, because this is one where I just feel like this is what, if we're going to do this exercise and we have SOIs, then that they really, and then because they're reported against,
we need to be able to.
Yeah, we need to be able to actually get some useful information from them.
Right, that's happy for that to be included into the recommendation. Now the mover and the seconder are happy for that to be included? They are? Good. So now it seems that debate has been exhausted. I'll move the recommendation that the report be received. All those in favour please say aye.
Aye.
Against, no, carried. I'll now move to the recommendation to Council, which has been altered to include the item about measuring performances. We've got the wording there.
Measures. That'd be lovely, thank you.
So that comes under the specific matters that we're going to be asking for. The mover and seconder, happy with that? There's no further discussion. All those in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Against, no. The ayes have it. Thank you. We have one further item on the agenda, which, no we don't, we have more than one. Item 10, draft rates remission policy. Ms. Harrison, and this is on pages 141 to 147. Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you. Through the chair, so this report is bringing back the draft rates remission policy to focus on some of the areas that were requested through the last workshop that was held, and what the policy was around making the rates remission policy for community, sporting and other organisations clearer, that it did include social housing providers. So the attachment on page 145 outlines some changes that are needed to make that clearer.
Thank you. Nikki, in section 4.1 it refers to the legality, the legal advice in relation to the discounted early payment rates. That should have been on attachment 2, I think. I looked hard through it when I was reading it again last night. I couldn't actually see the legal advice, but I think it's contained in attachment 2, the discount early payment rates. Am I correct?
Through the chair, I think the reading of that section is a little bit unclear. Some recent legal advice that we get, even though we have a remission policy outlined in a long-term plan and also within a rates resolution, the legal advice was that we should have a policy, and the policy
Yep.
is clear, and that is attached in the second.
Thank you very much. That's fine.
Sorry.
I think, I think that the report outlines the spirit that I've seen council during the workshops, and particularly in terms of the Kaumātua housing and other areas. And in terms of the discount for early payment, it's really formalising what we've already been doing. So, Councillor Rutledge.
Yeah, it was just simply a query on how we treat the hospice, and particularly in light of their new building and plan. Is that captured by any kind of rates from mission?
Through the chair, no.
Should it be? And that's a should it be? I think it might. Maybe it should.
That gets into a real health situation, in my view, which is a bit different to a housing one.
Yeah, I agree. I just wonder if they do sit as something that's a little different to
It's something that we
everything
could.
else.
I think it would. The point that you've raised is something we could examine a little bit further next time we have a workshop. I don't think it fits within the housing intentions that we have in the policy for the rates remissions at the moment. But it's certainly something that could be looked at.
Okay, I'd certainly appreciate it if at the appropriate time officers could turn their minds to that.
We'll ask them to take a note of that. Thank you, Councillor Rutledge. Your Worship, and then Councillor Skinner, then Councillor Dahlberg.
Well, I think just following up on the query about the hospice, I mean, now is the appropriate time if we were going to be making any changes to the policy. But I've just got a question in relation to private hospitals. Does Manuka Street pay rates? I'm presuming, I'm sorry, Nikki, you may not know that.
Through the chair, yes.
Yes. Okay, so it's so if we think about the number of medical centres, health providers throughout the city, there are quite a number of them that would be currently rated. Thank you.
It's a total new area from housing. I think we need to get an examine. I would hate to just off the cuff make a decision today. Right, thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Skinner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Harrison. One I'm just querying about is in regards to Māori freehold land, and I see you've got an addition there with the marae and Whakatu marae. Can you explain that a little bit more? So that's in addition to what we've had in the past. That's not what we've had previous.
Through the chair, the Kaumātua flats are not on Maori freehold land. They're actually there is a process that they're undertaking to have that reviewed through the land courts. However, so in the direction that was given in the workshop was that, as well as social housing providers, which have a specific definition as registered community housing providers in the policy, that the council wanted us to also look at concessions around the Kaumātua housing as well, and that's what's been included in the policy. But because they're not registered community housing providers, they've had to have been provided for separately in the policy.
So it's to capture, which otherwise wouldn't be. And the other question, and maybe more a comment, is that in the past, I think there's been a misunderstanding from the public in regards to a Māori provision, because we in Nelson, we don't have, would that be correct, we don't have any freehold land that would come under what the central government are putting on us to consider?
Through the chair, this report covers the fact that we will be bringing, so again, as part of the feedback from the long-term plan workshops, we do actually have some pieces of Maori freehold land, and we will be bringing that directly to council on the 14th of December to consider whether a policy is appropriate. So there are parcels of land, and there may well be more in the future. So therefore, the first recommendation of this report is actually moving the item of the Maori freehold land directly to council.
Okay, so it might be, Mr. Chair, might be more comment that we've got to be quite clear how we express this to the public, because last time, or time before last, we got our heads bitten off for that we were making these variations, etc. But I understood that the central government would make sure that we were considering it, but it didn't apply to Nelson. So where we had the wording, it didn't apply to Nelson, so it looked like we were doing something we weren't.
Yeah, you're quite correct, Councillor Skinner. It will be imperative that we very carefully consider the messages that we're giving and the wording that we're using, so that it is very clear exactly what we're doing, and that will be, I'm sure, the way it'll be presented to council in December. Thank you for that, Councillor Dalberg.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to the bit on the actual remit itself.
The actual
145, page 145, and it's in that first paragraph. It says, one of them says, assist the organisational survival and. My concern there really is you know, they've got a management and governance responsibility for financial matters. Survival sort of worries me. I think, are we actually trying to support low turnover, low income groups? Where we're saying survival worries me, that we're going to be a bailout I'd use that term for a bailout if I've got a problem with my management. I think we're trying to say there, low turnover, low income groups. I think that's what we're trying to say. I'm just worried about the word survival.
Any comment, Nikki?
Through the chair, we'll look at that word and find more appropriate wording if that's the direction of the committee.
Okay. I'd call for someone to move the recommendation to council.
With that,
moved by Councillor Courtney. It's been seconded by Councillor Noonan. I'll put the first part, which is the Governance Committee decision. Receiving of the report and the delegating to council. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. And I'll call for a mover, a seconder for the recommendation to council on the rates remission policy. Councillor Dalberg. Seconded, Councillor Rutledge. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? No. Carried. Thank you. We move to the last item on the open agenda, which is the NELMAC letter of expectation, which is largely procedural in terms of the timing, which meant that it can't be dealt with today, unfortunately. So it'll recommend to council that it goes through to council.
One question on that, Chair. What was the date that was received? The letter of expectation. That it can't be here.
Nikki.
Through the chair, the letter of expectation is something that council actually send to the board in terms of preparation of the next year's statement of intent. And given that we only had the workshop, we've only just recently met with NELMAC. Really, we're just referring this matter on.
So the letter of expectation can be drafted and taken to council.
And considered at the council meeting.
It's timing.
Okay.
Can I get a move? Moved Councillor Noonan, seconded Councillor Courtney. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? No. The ayes have it. Carried. We move now to the last item, very last item on the open agenda, which is the exclusion of the public, item number 13. Number 12. Do I have a mover? It's moved by Councillor Noonan and seconded by Councillor Skinner. No discussion. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? No.